Hello, good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to today's webinar on water stewardship challenges and opportunities as part of Enterprise Ireland's continuing Sustainable Enterprise webinar series 2025. We'll just give maybe 10 to 15 seconds for everyone to join us and then we'll kick off. Okay, I think it's past 1 minute past one, so we will just kick off there. So hello and good afternoon again, and you're very welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ankush Shersad, and I'm the specialist in the Sustainability Solutions Department of Enterprise Ireland. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and we will make the recording and the slides available afterwards. And the recording of this webinar will also be available to watch back on the Enterprise Ireland's website in the on-demand section where you can find our previous webinars from this year and earlier. We are delighted to host today's webinar in collaboration with 2050 partners and Water Stewardship Ireland and Enterprise Ireland client companies. So for today's webinar, I'm joined by Colm Gaskin and Linda Reid of 2050 Partners, Ian Ryan of White Nutrition, and Damien Kenrick of Rye River Brewing. So welcome all, and thank you for taking your time to be with us today. We'll have time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them into the Q&A section and we will address them in the end. So the Sustainable Enterprise webinar series by Enterprise Ireland has been running since 2023, and all previous webinars have covered a range of sustainability topics from how to develop a sustainability strategy and action map to 2025 sustainability trends and sustainability reporting for SMEs in the light of shifting regulatory frameworks. All are available at Enterprise Ireland's website for you to watch back. This leg of webinar series will feature 3 webinars focusing on sustainability in industrial water use, regulations such as the EU Deforestation Regulation, the EUDR, and the CBAM regulation, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and also another webinar on understanding the national EU ESG requirements in the EU countries like Germany, Italy, and France for companies who are looking to export in those countries. But more about today's webinar. So today's webinar, we focus on the sustainability in the industrial water use. Water is a critical resource in industrial operations and is material to most businesses. But across Irish industry, water is often viewed as a low value utility, which often leads to insufficient use and inefficient use and poor water management by industries. Businesses often underestimate the risk associated with water scarcity, poor water quality, and extreme weather events. While companies track the price of water on their invoices, the real cost can run far deeper. The heating, pumping, chemical treatment, filtration, and wastewater processing all consume significant resources and often overlap with energy usage. And when left unmeasured, these hidden costs undermine the efficiency gains and increase operational risk. And with climate change, increasing regulation, and increasing tariffs, businesses must integrate water resilience into their long-term planning. So therefore, this webinar will address the identification of opportunities and actions to reduce reuse and restore water, water-related risk and challenges, and the impact of the new upcoming trade effluent charges on businesses. So I would now like to introduce our panel for this afternoon. So we are joined by Colm Gaskin, Head of Research at 2050 Partners. So Colm leads the 2050 Partners Research Center and manages the Water Stewardship Ireland program, a platform of over 400 industry and national stakeholders dedicated to solving shared water challenges through collective action. Alongside Colm, we have Linda Reid from 2050 Partners, who lead and support the freshwater sustainability and climate resilience planning. We're also joined by EI client company Rye River Brewing. So Damien Kenrick is a plant manager at Rye River Brewing and oversees maintenance, engineering, warehouse, packaging, quality assurance, health and safety, and sustainability across the business. So multiple hats there for Damien, very busy man. And we are also joined by Ian Ryan, a sustainability manager at Wyeth Nutrition with over 28 years of experience in the industry. And Ian has a proven track record of driving innovation and delivery in sustainable management. So that's our fantastic panel for this afternoon. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Colm Gaskin to kick off the webinar. Thanks, Colm. Over to you.
Thanks, Kush. That was a really great introduction to the session today. So we're delighted to be here with ourselves and 2050 partners, but really delighted to be joined by some of our colleagues who've been on the journey with us over the past 5 to 10 years. Ian at Wyeth and Damien in Rye River, who's been on our Certified Water Stewardship program over the past number of months. So we're delighted to share some of the insights both from ourselves and by the past 10 or 15 years of learnings and engaging with Irish industry on the topic of water. But also the industry from insights themselves from both Ian and Damien, who are both on quite different parts of the journey, but both will, I think, equally provide a lot of lessons learned for this afternoon's webinar. So without further ado, I am going to start sharing my screen and yeah, just we'll get cracking on the reason why we're all here today. So great. Hopefully everyone is seeing my screen.
Yeah.
I think some of you on the call may already be familiar with ourselves and 2050 partners, so I'm not going to dwell on this in too much detail other than we support business teams to transition to sustainable outcomes, and we've done so since 2005. And we do this one by working directly with businesses, but also by working collaboratively with regional, national, and international stakeholders like the likes of Enterprise Ireland, who've been a great support to ourselves over the past 20 years. And we're really focused on developing corporate sustainability support programs of scale and verifiable impact. Over the past 10 to 15 years, we've developed the SkillNet Client Ready Academy in association with SkillNet Ireland. We've also developed the Sustainable Enterprise SkillNet in collaboration with SkillNet Ireland, and our Certified Water Stewardship program is managed under the Sustainable Enterprise SkillNet. As Ankush mentioned, since 2013, we've been involved in the running of Water Stewardship Ireland, which is a community of practices for businesses from all across the country to share best practices, collaborate, and come up with new ideas to solve some of the key shared water challenges that we have as a nation. And we also run the HSE Lean Academy. Ankush has touched on today's agenda, so I'm not going to cover this in too much detail. And he's also provided a really good scene setter, I think, already. So I'm not going to replicate what Ankush has covered in his introductory section, other than to say that, yes, water is integral to the Irish economy. And today, in particular, we're going to look at how the water stewardship approach in particular can support industry to mitigate these challenges more effectively. So not just by reducing water use and becoming more efficient, but also touching on these key pillars mentioned across water stewardship of quality, water governance, the catchment impact, circularity. Water circularity is an emerging topic, but also the overall resilience, and really to generate an understanding that water risk is business risk, and water resilience is integral to businesses going forward. We're seeing a lot of this now with the likes of double materiality assessments being carried out across Irish organisations, that there's a growing understanding that there is a need to tackle water right across the economy in terms of building out on our overall economic resilience at a national and at a micro level. So I'm going to hand over at this point to my colleague Linda Reid, who will walk us through how water is used both in manufacturing, but also with a view to the services sector as well, and why a structured approach to water management and water stewardship can make a difference right across the spectrum, across all organizations, large and small. And then, as Ankush mentioned, we're delighted to hear from Ian and Damien at a later point, who've been putting this water stewardship philosophy into practice, which has emerged into some really practical impacts over the past number of years. And then we'll close with some of the key supports that are there for Irish businesses currently, from both Uisce Éireann, from the likes of SkillNet and Enterprise Ireland, and how they can support Irish businesses to manage water more responsibly. So with that, Linda, I'll hand over to yourself to bring us through the first section in terms of setting the scene.
Thanks, Colm. And I'm going to try to get through my slides pretty quickly so we can spend time listening to our guest speakers. but I just want to sort of set the scene so everybody's on the same page in terms of water use, and we'll start from there anyway. So basically, in most industrial operations, water plays a number of different roles, used directly for products, for cleaning, rinsing, cooling, and heating, utility systems. And a thing that's important to remember, these systems or these uses are often very interconnected. So a change in one area can affect another area. And because oftentimes water moves invisibly through production and support systems, it's really easy to underestimate how much water is used and where efficiency gains might be hiding.
And Linda, this is a really important starting point because we can already see that water flow means that water is embedded right throughout the operations of an organization, and not just maybe taps and toilets as maybe some employees in an organization will see.
Yeah, and that's what makes understanding the site's water use and system really important. If you want to go to the next slide, just want to give an example of that, water use doesn't stop within the boundaries of the factory site. So just using, for example, a bottle of water, it's obvious that there's water inside the bottle, or as we'll talk about in the beer bottle. But it's important to keep in mind always that water is also used to make the plastic for the bottle, to produce labels and caps, to transport the materials, and to power the site. And so when you add it up, there can be several liters for water of embedded or virtual water for every liter of bottled water that's actually produced. And I think bottled water is a good example for illustrating why a water stewardship mindset needs to look beyond the direct operations of the site and the facility to the broader supply chain, and certainly also the value chain, understanding where water is used and where risks or dependencies can come up upstream. If you want to go to the next slide, let's just talk a little bit about water risks. And the graphic on the right shows types of water risks. Some folks talk about them in different ways, but basically you're going to see physical risks like droughts, flooding, water scarcity, contamination, that it can affect the supply or the quality of the water supply. Those are usually pretty easy to notice because they cause more immediate operational disruptions. Regulatory risks are another potential risk, especially when it relates to changes in how water is managed or monitored or priced. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the new Ishka-Aaron trade effluent charging framework, and that's a good example of a regulatory risk and how that affects cost and those sorts of things. Then there are operational risks. Those are related to how water moves through the site. So aging infrastructure, having a lack of meters, or meters aren't working in the site, leaks, treatment systems that don't work properly. Those aren't always kind of headline news, or maybe not everybody on site affects them, but that people that work in operations can understand how they can really quietly drain resources and create compliance headaches down the line. And then finally, reputational risks. How a company's water use is perceived by communities or investors or customers is really important. And as people start paying more attention to environmental performance, being seen as a responsible water user becomes even more important, and also part of maintaining a license to operate. So a key point is the risks are growing. They don't exist in isolation. They very definitely overlap. And a single event like a supply disruption can turn really quickly into an operational and reputational issue if it's not addressed quickly. And that's why water stewardship framework is so valuable. It helps businesses understand and manage the risk together as a whole in a holistic way, not just as one.
And Linda, this is really interesting because as I outlined at the start, water risk is business risk, and we are seeing an evolution of these risks as we're seeing changes in the overall landscape, whether it's climate change and the potential impact on quantity and quality related issues, upcoming regulatory framework changes, but also the financial risk element is something that maybe the likes of CSRD and double materiality are bringing to the conversation as well, where water risk and water costs are actually potentially a business continuity issue, which in turn is a key financial risk for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we go to the next slide, hopefully it'll help explain that a little bit further. It's important to think of in terms when you're looking at your water use in terms of impacts and dependencies, and that's really closely tied to that double materiality. So dependencies are the way that your business relies on water for whatever those uses are, production, cleaning, cooling. And then impacts are the ways in which the business affects both the resource and society as a whole. So, for example, through abstraction or discharge or contamination, the business can affect society. Flowing from those impacts and dependencies are risks. So, if you're dependent on water and can't get it, that's a risk to society. If you're negatively impacting society, by your water use, that's a risk, and you'll see those turn up in the terms of costs. But I think it's also important to look at opportunities anytime you think of a risk. What's the opportunity to mitigate that, ameliorate it, improve it, or actually just to do things better overall that benefit the company?
And this is like a massive mindset shift, right, Linda? Because we've had a situation for a number of years where, okay, it's all about incremental water consumption reduction, and let's try and be a little bit more efficient in terms of water use. Well, water is integral to our operations here, and it's not about how much water we use, but what if we didn't have water? What if we didn't have water? What would the impacts tomorrow be in our business if we came in and the taps aren't working?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said before, these risks are increasing, and there is much more being paid attention to kind of climate change driven negative impacts and risks that are coming to companies. And the folks that are doing investing in your company are paying attention to that. The people that are providing supports to help manage those sorts of risks, and we'll come back to those types of support in a little bit. But let me share an example with you now. One of the clearest examples of where water risks and opportunities intersect, and that's trade effluent. So I'm sure most of the audience is aware, but for those who aren't, there's going to be a new set of national trade effluent charges that come into effect on October 1st in 2026. And trade effluent customers are going to be charged based on the classification they fall into. And there are 3 categories of classification. So the first one is commercial industrial. Those are users of 100 meters cubed, 1,000 meters cubed or more annually. The next category is or less annually. The next category is 1,000 meters cubed to 249,999 meters cubed. And then the third category is the industrial category. That's 250 meters cubed and higher annually. I know it's probably hard to see on the right, but we can share the source for that. Basically, that's kind of the categorization process to help folks figure out where they fall. Do you want to go to the next slide? How do you know if you're industrial, commercial, where this is kind of how the line is drawn? So for industrial activities, biopharma, chem, pharma, energy, food and drink, manufacturing, metals, surface coatings, transportation, waste. On the commercial side, it tends to be food services, hospitals and nursing homes, laundering, swimming pools, commercial car wash, and construction activities. And that's kind of also well aligned with, volumetric use. And so you first figure out what category you're in, and then start looking at what kind of charges are going to apply to you. So if you're in category 1, commercial activities, basically your charges are going to be, you're going to have a non-domestic wastewater standing charge, a fixed charge, and then your variable charge is only going to be a volumetric charge. If you're in the other two categories, industrial 2 or industrial 3, basically, you're going to see the similar categories. So the non-domestic standing charge, the fixed charge, but the difference that's coming into play is you're going to see both a Mogden formula and a volumetric charge. And the reason that this new framework is coming into place is that because previously all around the country, the charges had been historically set by local authorities, and they varied from county to county. And so this is an effort to bring everybody under a national scheme. You want to show the next slide? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but basically the Mogden formula says we're going to, sampling and analysis of your trade effluent is going to take place to derive the inputs to determine your charges. And we're looking at BOD, COD, suspended solids, those sorts of things. And again, we can provide the link to this information. I'm also aware that Ishka Aaron and 2050 Partners are going to be doing some outreach and education on this topic in the future.
And Linda, this is really interesting in that we've seen for the past 10 years maybe growing incentives in terms of water efficiency, but there's possibly incentives for organizations now on this quality element in terms of, better management practices of water quality on site, possibly leading to, reductions in costs, etc. Which is again another incentive to bring the water stewardship conversation into play, that water stewardship is more than just the efficiency piece. We now have a really good incentive here as Irish businesses to say, look, we need to look at quantity, we need to look at quality, governance, and here's the reasons why.
Yeah, and it's going to need a really close look at what the balance of those things are. So if you decrease your flow, it might drive up, the inputs in the effluent that's going to cost you more because it has to be treated. So a lot of calculations need to be done to decide what improvements need to be made and on which side of that equation.
And Linda, I can see time's going, so I'm actually going to skip the water stewardship
Absolutely.
piece for now and come back to it because I know we don't have too much time with Ian. So Ian, if you're ready, we might just go into the first case study on Wyatt. And Wyatt have had a really extraordinary journey in terms of water stewardship over the past 10 or 15 years, becoming not only a national exemplar in terms of water management and water stewardship, but also a real exemplar at an international level as well.
Yeah, thanks, Colm. Yeah, time is tight as always. Thank you for your time. So I suppose the question we ask is like, why focus on water? And I suppose at a very high level, it's an SDG number 6 there, and there's a lot of information on that slide. But basically, there's a lot of people in the world don't have access to safe drinking water. We're very fortunate here in Ireland. In general, water is available and sanitation is available. But I suppose talking back to what you said earlier, for us here in Wyatt on site, water is simply the keyest ingredient. No other ingredient is more important than water. We abstract from the river. We do all our own water processing. We've invested millions, even recently, in upgrading that to deal with new challenges. And like you said earlier, if we had a cut in water, how far would the factory operate? You wouldn't get cast a car park because you have to wash your hands there. So basically, that would be the end of that. In terms of our stewardship journey, yeah, I suppose up until 2018, the site had always had a great focus on water because we were producing our own and cared about quality and it with our final product. But from 2018 on, we started down the journey of the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard, and that really got us focused on outside that factory. The factory walls and that. So there was a corporate policy to kind of aim for this standard in stewardship, which really took us very much into the community and into the catchment, and a lot of work around that and things we never really looked at before. Our whole water chain, or where the river starts and where a river ends, In 2019, we were certified, and we've been certified at platinum level, which is the highest level since that time. And fortunately, last year the site won the Green Awards in water management. So you can make the journey. We started from nothing. I put up here the water process on site. People can take a look at it after, but this was one of the first things we did. Like not understanding the level participants are coming into this app, but this would be the most simplest water map we have for the site. But yet it relates that, you know, everything starts at the river and everything finishes at the river. So the catchment is, you know, bordering both sides, left and right, and everything in between is what we have to manage. We're in an unfortunate position that, you know, after our wastewater treatment plant, we return water to the river. In fact, technically the estuary, in better quality than we take it out at. And we've seen challenges. Quality is a really important thing, whereas the focus pre-2018 was very much around metering and volume and reducing that volume and water saving projects. Now the focus is very much shifted to quality. We're seeing a lot more challenges in the river, in, you know, things like forever chemicals like your PFAS, your Teflons and things like that. Microplastics will have to be dealt with for sure down the road. And also, I suppose there's a little bit of interest coming around these pharmaceuticals in our environment. So pharmaceutical products that are actually in the water, and they are in there. We have tested at very low levels. One of the great difficulties with doing any of that type of testing is that there is actually no European limit set for a lot of those things yet. So we don't know what's good and what's bad. We'll grab the next slide, please. So just some examples of projects we've done. Where I say the majority of our work has been reaching out to the community, engaging with stakeholders. Like, we still continue to do the work on site. We still find reasons to improve our water usage, and every drop does count. It really does. Simple things like on the site, we use a lot of steel water pumps due to the nature of our business, that basically are the seal between the pump and the product is created by water, and that water goes to waste. We've reduced that usage on over 53 pumps at this stage on site. And we're probably close on 10,000 cubic meters of water saved a year, just by putting some flow meters in. Reverse osmosis was brought to site to tackle some of those water quality challenges that are required for infant nutrition products. And of course, reverse osmosis in a basic state gives you about 20% losses. So you're upping your water usage, you know, by a considerable amount by implementing those technologies. We've managed to put in high efficiency reverse osmosis, where we recover some of that water through a second osmosis plant and use it in other parts of the factory. And indeed, the final bit of that waste from that plant, we now use that as the first stage of our wastewater treatment plant in taking out fat oils and greases. We use to heat that water and use it to take out fat oil and greases, whereas previously that would have been effectively drinking water used for that process. So our reverse osmosis plant now, with the exception of some backwash that's very salty from the softeners, all the water recovered. We're up to about 98% recovery there from a baseline of 80. So it can be done. It saves the business money. One of the key things that's been driving that is that we did, in conjunction with 2050 partners, we did do a true cost of water. I highly recommend it to anyone that hasn't done it, depending on where you are in your journey. Map out your water usage, work out your true cost. What does it really cost? It's not the Irish water bill. Like in our case, it was complicated because we were processing ourselves from the river. But there's a whole load of steps your site probably implements to get the water quality you need for your processes, and you really need to figure that out. Once we had that done, I suppose the access to capital improved greatly, because we could actually provide paybacks that we could stand over. So other examples, and it's another example of one we did the true cost of CIP. Again, that's driven a lot of capital investment in CIP process on site, and indeed a lot of changes operationally, which were difficult because we had to, you know, work with our colleagues in quality who don't like change so much, to get them over the line. But significant savings in CIP, water usage and CIPs, and indeed a help for production, because we reduced the length and time of CIPs, therefore providing more time in process areas to deliver product for the site. Get the next slide there, please, Colm. So water project example, and perhaps Colm, we get a chance to speak about this later, but I couldn't go through this without mentioning the Catchment Excellence Programme. So I think that's really what's driven a lot of our stakeholder engagement. We've got stakeholders from around the catchment and the river. The river is 70 kilometres along. We implemented this programme in conjunction with 2050 partners, and we got out physically onto the river at different stages, high, middle and lower course of the river. We've done workshops in hotels along the river, and then went out in the afternoon. We did some citizen science, we did some testing, and I think it was really a very successful project all around. I suppose when you get further down your water journey, I'd highly recommend type of program. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we probably delivered more for bang for a buck in 12 weeks than the previous 2 years of cold calling and meeting people and talking about water stewardship. So it really accelerated that whole engagement and community groups, and it also adds that bit of, you know, that bit of belief within industry in the community that they are, that the motivations are good and it's not greenwashing or any of that kind of thing. And I suppose falling out of that, then we do the Deal Water Blitz. I think that's the last slide we have there, guys. The next slide. The Deal Water Blitz is citizen science. It's really simple. It's really low cost. We just got the people from this program to go and find other people that care about water in the community, and we give them some test kits that literally cost a couple of euros. They go out and they sample the water twice a year, and they load it up on an app. I think that's the next slide, please, Colin. There, they load it up.
I took that one out, Ian, and I just put the two images below.
Oh, you put the two in. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Good stuff. They go out and they gather that data, and that data is collated by UCD and used to generate some data nationally. But the key, I suppose, the key thing of that, we do monitor nitrogen and phosphates. The key thing from that they want is photographs. They want to see how the natural course of the rivers are changing over time. I think, you know, that's a journey we've come through from really not understanding much, not even know what a catchment was, to where we are now. Really, most of that was done in kind of 3 years. You know, we've just been refining that process, I suppose, for the last 3 years. And best of luck to everyone on their water stewardship journey, because it's an exciting one. There's tons more to learn. We have a lot more things we need to do as well in terms of improving the quality and improving our own processes. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks for taking the time. We know you had a 1:30 commitment, so really appreciate you taking the time and giving us the whistle-stop tour of what's been quite a long journey in Wyatt.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ian. I think in some ways showcasing Ian's example has been really useful before we go back to Linda in terms of, you know, what is water stewardship? What does water stewardship mean? Because now we can, with tangible, practical examples from the Wyatt case, identify, you know, what we mean by water stewardship and how water stewardship is much broader than water management, and it's looking at, you know, site, it's looking at catchment, but it's looking at that stakeholder inclusive element as well, and how when you bring the quantity element, the quality, the governance, the financial, like we've seen with Ian's project, it can build a really substantial and strong water stewardship message that can, you know, put you in a position like Ian, where you're then in a position where you can influence, whether it's your supply chain, whether it's local stakeholders in the catchment, whether it's peers in this call today, that, you know, by adopting this water stewardship approach, it can lead to really positive business impact as well as environmental impact. So Linda, what is water stewardship?
Yeah, I actually like the way this turned out. So Ian mentioned that they have aligned themselves with the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard. Well, this is the definition of water stewardship from the Alliance for Water Stewardship, and I think it's the most used definition that's out there anyway. But basically, it's the use of water that is socially equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial. Let's start with that. So anybody that knows about sustainability knows about the three-legged stool: environment, society, and the economy. So water stewardship kind of adapts that, focuses on water, but then also a really important part that Ian mentioned is, and you just mentioned, Colin, is you achieve that use, that equitable use, that environmentally sustainable use, and that economically beneficial use through a stakeholder inclusive process. So you know, and I think that comes back in if you've looked at CSRD or these sorts of things, that's really important that you consider for double materiality purposes what your impacts are. Goes back to that sort of dependencies and impacts as well. What are your stakeholders thinking about this, and have you involved them in the process? And in terms of water stewardship, as Ian mentioned again, it's not just what's happening within the gates of the site, but also across the catchment, or if you're withdrawing from an aquifer, you know, that whole area that's reliant on the source. So,
and Linda, I think that's a really important point around the complexity of water. It's not just about management and reliance on water at a site level, and it's no good to be a good custodian of water when all those other operations or entities or stakeholders around you in your catchment aren't good custodians of water. I'm always taken by the phrase that it's no good to be a clean fish in a dirty
Yeah,
pond,
yeah.
because you'll be a dirty fish as well. And that's what makes water stewardship different.
Yeah, and part of that journey and part of that interacting with stakeholders is letting people know the good things that you're doing and paying attention to maybe some of the other bad things that are happening, and seeing if you can affect positive changes there. Um, and when companies take a water stewardship approach, you see a very clear set of outcomes. These are the outcomes that the Alliance for Water Stewardship is using as part of their standards. So you want to see good water governance, healthy freshwater ecosystems, and safe water sanitation and hygiene for all. But I think for this group, really the larger focus is on water quantity, so making sure there's a sustainable water balance. You don't take out more than you return, and that what you return is good water quality. So as Ian mentioned, they're pulling from the river, they're discharging to the estuary, and their quality of their discharge water is cleaner than what they're pulling to use for their operations. And when those things all come together, it turns into positives for the business in relation to the risks that we talked about and the costs and opportunities part of the piece of the puzzle. So how do you get there? You really need a system. It's not sort of a one-off, oh, let's throw a meter there, oh, let's fix a pipe there. It's really important to have a robust water stewardship management system in place. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the continuous improvement processes that are Plan, Do, Check, Act. ISO is based on that. Alliance for Water Stewardship is based on that. And basically, it means you have to have the right structure in place to map and monitor your water flows, set targets, review the performances, and engage staff internally and your external stakeholders in continual improvement processes. And so whether you're looking at AWS or ISO, some of you might have ISO 14001 or 50001, all part of that process, turning one-off projects into ongoing strategic approaches. And that's really about managing water well for the long term.
Excellent. Thanks for that synopsis, Linda. And I think Ian's presentation beforehand really did bring this to life, because water stewardship can be a nebulous concept for those being introduced to it for the first time. But I think, some of the case study examples linked to the theory here is really helpful for connecting the dots, I think, in terms of water stewardship business impact. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Damien from Rye River Brewing Company. So Damien is in slightly different position to Wyatt, who've been able to look at all those pillars across water stewardship, those five outcomes, where I think with Rye, there's been a real focus on the quantity and quality pillars over the past 10 or so years. And I think they've got a really good story to tell. They're a current participant on our Certified Water Stewardship program. So hopefully they'll continue to have a really positive story to tell in terms of the water stewardship approach over the next 5 or so years. So Damien, please, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and maybe just giving us a sense of who Rye River Brewing Company are before we get into the real nitty-gritty on your water stewardship approach.
Yeah, thanks very much, Colin. Thanks everybody for allowing us to participate. So Rye River Brewing Company is an independent brewery in Ireland. We've been in business since 2013, and kind of we're a small brewery at the start, and as with every kind of small business, our main focus at the beginning was on the quality and the reach of our products and making sure that we were getting a foothold in the market. And you can tend to go through that for a good few years, while the likes of our utilities and our social sustainability, they can be put on the back burner. And it was only after we kind of established ourselves as a business that we started to really look at our utility consumptions and our footprint in the overall landscape of things. So we said we'd make a challenge to on ourselves to make sure that we were not only making the best quality beer that we could, but we were also challenging ourselves to be best in class in terms of industry standards, which can be quite daunting when some breweries have been around for 10, 20, 100 years, where they have the established processes. So we made it a focus on ourselves to try and push everything from a continuous improvement agenda, whether it be our reduction in consumption of utilities, our wastes, our quality, and we bring that mindset into everything that we do, and water being one of the main focal points. So for ourselves, I just have a few brief slides put together. I don't have Wyatt's expansive detail that they can put in, but from our perspective, our framework for water consumption is kind of built around our Origin Green program, which we were awarded gold members this year and last year, which we're very proud of. So we had to have our 5-year tracker renewed in 2022, and our target was to reduce our consumption by 5% year on year. So our relative water consumption to beer produced. And we actually did very well in our first year, which is a great win for us because we reduced our water consumption by about 25%. So it was a great target to achieve, and because we did such a good job, we now have to reassess our targets for future years to make sure that we keep ourselves challenged. So if you look at the data for the past few years, it looks like it's kind of fairly level pegging, that there hasn't been any major improvement. But one thing that I would like to point out is that in 2024, we installed a new warehouse, a new 100 hectoliter brew house, a new packaging line, a new canning line. So there was a major expansion, one of the largest in the business's history, all happened in 2024. And with all of those new processes and new equipment, we were able to maintain our water consumption rate rather than increase it, which can come with some new processes and new inefficiencies while we're trying to learn the processes. So part of our challenge now is that because we've basically tackled a lot of the low-hanging fruit that are available for us to address in the business, we now really have to look at the finer optimization of our processes, which is kind of where we've moved to with a lot of the investments and the new equipment that we have available to us.
And that's a great oversight, Damien, because it brings me to your next slide, which I think will be fascinating for those in the call today in terms of looking back to the 2022 data. Yeah, with most businesses, there's a lot of quick wins, but then you hit a baseline and, well, where to next? And I think in your particular case study here, you've identified some really excellent projects that can maintain and build on the journey that you've been on over the past 5 or so years.
Yeah, so it's kind of it can be a challenge for a business of our size because we don't have a dedicated resource to look at this thing, these metrics all day, every day, and identify them. So what we tried to establish was not just in this, but in every kind of challenge we have, we try to incorporate everybody in the business model. So from operators up to management. So we use Microsoft Planner, which is basically an online portal tool where anybody can put in suggestions. So it just means that there's no red tape, there's no paperwork. You just put in a 1-line suggestion and you put in your name against the task, and then I can go and ask the person for a bit more detail. And it just means that you try and incorporate and engage everybody within the business on the same focal points. And where we have water usage reduction, we've one for energy, one for gas, one for CO2, one for waste. So it just means that you not only have as much input as possible to try and tackle the problems, you're also making everybody engaged so they can all see the various ideas that are happening across the business. And from our data, as you've seen, where we reduced by 25%, one of the main things, and I can't emphasize it any more than the data shows, it's not overlooking something that you see on a daily basis and just assume that it's optimized. For us, our RO system, which was our previous one, it had been installed didn't know how it worked. It just did the job. We were happy with it, and it worked for years. We got it serviced regularly, and everything seemed fine. And as I gained more and more knowledge along the way, I started questioning things and various areas. And on the RO system, I just noticed on some of the flow rates that the concentrate versus the permeate wasn't really stacking up to where the original information would have suggested. So at the next service, I asked them, could they just look at it and see why I can't optimize this, because there was no interface. And it turned out it was just a damaged valve, that it was just allowing more concentrate to go to drain, and our wastage was much more of a proportion of our RO output than you would have expected from a system like that. And literally overnight, we had saved about 20% of that 25%, and it was something that everybody walked past every day. And then the next stage, we've actually installed a new RO system just because capacity required it. So it has a lot more data available to us. So now we can track our full volumetric permeate volumes and our concentrate volumes. They're now stacked against our total volume, so we can identify how much is actually going through our RO system as an overall percentage of our usage. And then we've also installed 3 new automated CIP systems. And this is where we really need to get into the refinement, because when you get a company and they install a system for you and they get it running and it seems like it's fine, they're not going to go to the effort of optimizing it to the nth degree. They're going to say, are you happy with that? And you go, yes. And then you take it, but not every set point is optimized. It's just working. So in the same way as we approach the RO, we're going to be approaching each CIP system and looking at the flow rates, the times, the temperatures, and see and rationalize every one of them to make sure that we know that we're not inefficient in any way.
That's excellent, Damien. And it struck me the sheer volume of investment in making these improvements. Was it a tough sell to senior management? Because we find with a lot of sites, like trying to sell a water project is quite difficult, and whether it's the business case or the strategic case or the operational case. And what do you feel has been some of maybe the key drivers or the key variables that have kind of got that business case across the line?
From our perspective, I'm lucky in the sense that my manager, he's a very he trusts all of us that are kind of saying our piece, from whether it be quality or from sustainability or from an engineering point of view. So we knew that we had to scale in terms of volume. And when it came to the likes of the CIP systems, it wasn't just a water or a chemical reduction. There was a quality aspect to it where you need to make sure that your cleaning cycles are kind of segregated depending on the department. You want to make sure that if you're going to do an investment, you're doing it for the long term and not just for, okay, we'll take one box for now, we'll tackle the next one in a few years' time, because you end up kind of delaying projects that really need to happen together. So I think there wasn't much of a pushback from senior management. It was just we had to basically tie ourselves back until we had the capacity and the capability to do it. So this has been on the agenda for many years. It's just only now that we've grown enough that we've basically maximized everything we could from the old equipment, and the new equipment. Luckily, my boss, Tom Cronin, had no issue with backing us on every investment that we were looking for.
Excellent. And sometimes timing is everything. I think timing worked out well for this particular presentation.
Definitely, because we wouldn't have been hitting the volume that we're targeting this year if we had been sitting on our hands.
Excellent. And in terms of timing is everything, you're currently going through the Certified Water Stewardship program. So just in terms of the benefits to the business that you've seen so far on your water stewardship journey.
Yeah, like I would have been focused on water for many years, and you can get into the habit of thinking you've tackled every aspect or you've looked into it. And as part of our kind of ongoing commitment to all of the various programs and to our stakeholders and to our customers, we want to show that we're not just ticking the boxes of getting a certification and saying that's job done. We want to make sure we're pushing it and challenging ourselves. And one thing I found since doing the water stewardship program was that it was a great melting pot of other industries where you could see and hear other people's points of view, and everybody has different challenges, especially in the likes of a manufacturing environment, and where ours is very focused on beer quality and CIP. There's a lot of overlays with other manufacturing sites where CIP is kind of like a nearly a general term, and it can be one of the most wasteful practices. So
Mm.
my ears were burning when I heard some people talking about some of the initiatives they did, because I knew that we just got 3 of them in, and I wanted to kind of see where we could get the best bang for our buck, and just kind of cut that corner where I don't have to spend 2 years of fine tuning myself. I can just ask somebody else how they did it. So it was a great engagement to try and hear everybody else's point of view, and also to get some insight into certain areas that maybe weren't on my radar. So the likes of the true cost of water, which Ian had highlighted, that was never even a term that I'd heard before, but it
Mm.
made a lot of sense, because it it's not just, I would have separated things from gas and electricity consumption, but when they're all
Mm.
related to water, you can kind of pool them together and then get a true value of the cost for one specific thing. So I was very interested with what Ian said about how he calculated the cost of CIP. That's something that I think if we knew the euro value of each of our
Yeah.
processes, we would really hone our focus onto which one's costing us the most, and is it the one that we should be that has the most improvement capability on it. So I mean, I think there's been a lot of benefit to myself in terms of getting an understanding of the next stages of what we would like to do, and what we can action as a business. And then so we
Yes.
kind of, part of the stewardship program is to create your kind of next stage action plan. So I stole a nice little infograph from somebody off the internet. But it does kind of, the reason I took it was it kind of showcases the path of how we've come at it, where you start off with very little information, but as you kind of move through the steps, you gain a bit more and a bit more, and each bit of understanding allows you to tackle various different aspects of the business. So our action plan now is essentially to look at all of our various water consumption processes and see if we can put some sort of a water meter or a map, because we only have one main water meter coming in. So
Mm.
I get a water consumption for the week. I don't know. I now know how much is going to RO, so I can tell you the percentage of that, but I don't know if maybe there is a spike. And I remember Steve was in our water stewardship program, he was showing a case study from a fishery where they looked at the timestamps and the
Yeah.
usage on a daily basis, and you're kind of going, if we had that information, that'd be great. And I actually have a company coming tomorrow to showcase a clamp-on water meter, which was also highlighted in the stewardship program. So it's all little
Excellent.
little
Excellent.
things that are twigging in my brain of the next stage of what we can do. And it's that's all you can need sometimes, just to get you to your next step.
That's brilliant, Damien. I think you're a little bit dismissive of yourself at the start and comparing yourself to Ian, who's an international example. But I think this presentation will give anyone on the call or anyone watching the recording afterwards a really good insight into a company that's doing really well, but has identified there's still a long road to go, but has identified the plan of action to get there. So well done. I think it's great that you've been involved in the program and that you're involved in this journey. Linda, do you have any burning questions? I know you've had a lot of interaction with Damien over the past while, so you've kind of seen kind of firsthand some of the real output that Damien shared today.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think it comes back to kind of that whole value chain issue as well, looking at supply chain and end user. And so when you think about your true cost of water, it can even be expanded. I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but expanded outside of what's happening with a particular process on the site, but also what's it costing you in terms of the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of financial burden, especially in manufacturing, and you're always going to get price increases, and you might have supply issues, and there's always something that's kind of waiting around the corner. So I think is one of the once you understand where your financial costs are being outlaid and which ones are on the increase and which ones you need to be ahead of, I think there's always the ability to kind of get ahead of it and be prepared, because like you say, with the costs coming for the wastewater, we're actually putting in a composite sampler and flow meter with continuous monitoring, things like that. For this is only happening in about a month's time, and this will allow us to not only just abide by, getting quarterly samples, which we would have done in the past. We will now be able to do at our own criteria bespoke sampling programs, so we can identify daily rates, weekly rates, hourly rates, whatever we want to do to map out our full process and see how much we can reduce our chemical loading that's going into the wastewater, to then be better prepared to reduce any future costs coming down the line, because it's going to come very quickly. And if we don't have the information, I'm a key believer data is king. If you don't have the data to back up your decisions, you're basically going to be throwing a dart against the wall and hoping it lands. But
Yeah,
if we got enough
absolutely.
information, we'll be better informed and make the right decisions moving forward.
And I think that goes back to that whole idea about a water stewardship management strategy, that it's, again, not just kind of these one-off things, but you're creating that whole plan, do, check, act cycle. We'd love to circle back with you in a little bit and see what you've come up with.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Damien. We really appreciate you sharing the insights.
Yeah, no bother. Look, I
look
really
forward to
appreciate being
hearing
able to participate.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Good stuff.
I'll move swiftly on. I know we only have a number of minutes left, so I'll just quickly cover some of the business supports available from the Uisce Éireann perspective. As mentioned, the Certified Water Stewardship Program that launched in 2019. There is now 6 tailored program offerings available from Uisce Éireann with the support of SkillNet Ireland. And I'll just focus on 3 if that's okay. 3 of the more pressing programs of relevance to this particular community. So the first one is the Water Stewardship for SMEs online course. So this is a 60-minute online program, an introduction to discovering best practices in water stewardship, learning how to conduct a water audit, finding practical efficiency examples or actions tailored to your business. And of course, because it's online learning, it's available to do at your own pace. So that's a really good introductory foundational program for those who have no prior experience of water stewardship. As Damien and Ian have touched on, our Certified Water Stewardship Program, which is developed in partnership with Uisce Éireann and SkillNet Ireland and the Sustainable Enterprise SkillNet. This has been running since 2019. Ian was actually a pilot member of the program in 2019. I was as a catalyst for a lot of the great actions that Wyeth have carried out over the past 5 or 6 years. It's an 8-week program. We've trained over 1,000 organizations in Ireland across water stewardship to date. 4 modules across 8 weeks, and ultimately it's a program designed by business for business. And with that in mind, we have a really critical outcome of the program, which is each site that goes in the program will develop a water stewardship plan or a charter for their site, which will identify the materiality of water, the key business drivers, the business case, developing that site water map that Ian shared, that simple site water map, but also identifying the key water saving opportunities and an agreed action plan. And then lastly, the Advanced Water Stewardship Program is the quality follow-on program to the Certified Water Stewardship Program. Same format, 4 workshops over a 12-week period. And the focus of this program is to help, as Linda alluded to earlier, those trade effluent customers who are going to be impacted by the changing tariff regime from October 2026. So we'll work with organizations on this program to look at minimization of costs by improving water quality treatment efficiency, reducing effluent discharge, preparing for new charges with tailored guidance and best practices, freeing up capacity in the network for future growth, and ultimately to protect the environment through sustainable trade effluent management. Uisce Éireann also have a number of sector-specific guides on their website in relation to water stewardship. And in terms of those upcoming training programs, so the QR code provides a link to the waterstewardship.ireland.com training site, and then you might put the link into the chat as well. But we have upcoming certified water stewardship program in the new year. We have an upcoming advanced water stewardship program in the new year, and we also have an introductory workshop to advanced water stewardship next Tuesday. That's the 25th of November. So this is a 2-hour introductory workshop helping businesses that may not know too much about trade effluent to navigate this evolving landscape, focus on trade effluent and protecting water quality. So for those that may not be in a position to dedicate their time to an 8-week advanced stewardship program, I think the best place to start is that introductory workshop next Tuesday. So 2 hours from 2 p.m. And that is it from us. Ankush, I might stop sharing my screen now. I know we're just at 2 o'clock. So I don't know if you have time for questions and answers, but we're happy to stay on for the next few minutes.
Okay, perfect. No, look, thank you so much for sharing all those insights and educating us on the water stewardship. And even from Damien, it was great to get those insights on the benefits and how to implement the water management programs. I mean, as Damien highlighted, there is a growing recognition both on the true cost and value of water to industry as the demand for industrial water continues to grow. And then ensuring water security is the area of high importance and demand. It is essential for the industrial operations to continue smoothly. So no, thank you so much for also highlighting those Ishka supports for companies, and I'm pretty sure they'll be very useful. And as you said, we will share the slides and all the informations with the links that Linda also is mentioning. We'll share them with the people there. I'm just checking. I think we only had one question that Linda has answered there. So I'm just being conscious of the time, so I'll just share my screen to maybe remind people the Enterprise Ireland support there quickly in a slide or two. So I suppose, yeah. So, well, I suppose first just to say thank you to all of you and our panel today for sharing your insights on the water management. And I'll just, before we wrap up today, here are a couple of our Enterprise Ireland supports that are available for company at every step of their decarbonization journey, from initial planning and capability building to capital investment in decarbonization research and innovation. So you're all aware of our climate action voucher and our consultancy and training support, such as the Green Pluses. So companies can use climate action voucher for seeking guidance on water or waste management, or seeking support to develop the initial sustainability and circular economy action plan. And companies can use the Green Start, which under the Access Advice support, for guidance on developing water stewardship or circularity plan, to quantify the product as well as organizational carbon footprint, to measure, manage the water usage, or to carry out circular gap assessment or the life cycle assessment also. So companies can use that for multiple green assignments. Companies seeking to build a high-level environmental management capabilities can use Green Plus, so external training on implementing a high-level environmental management standard. And Ian highlighted the AWS water stewardship. So anything on that level of standard, or the ISO standard, which Linda highlighted on the EMS or energy side of things, companies can use Green Plus for training. And while companies look to track, measure, and manage the water, the real cost can run far deeper and can consume significant resources and often overlap with energy usage, as we discussed. So we are helping businesses access funding to take the bigger steps in carbon reduction and green innovation. So capital investment supports are also available to support the decarbonization journey, but also metering support to track your energy, water, and gas usage are available for companies. So just to wrap up then, we also have some capability development programs that, if you're not aware, you can go to Enterprise Ireland website. We have a Sustainability Kickstarter workshop. It's a half-day workshop, and we are also running the Sustainability Leaders program in collaboration with SkillNet, which provides practical support and guidance to sustainability leads in the company on how to transition to a sustainable business. And lastly, our Sustainable Enterprise webinar series, as I highlighted earlier, is available on Enterprise Ireland's website. And we have 2 upcoming webinars, so please join us if you have time and interest. So the next week we have the Understanding the EU ESG Requirement, which can be of help to EU companies who are exporting in the EU market. And in the first week of December, we have the European Union's deforestation regulation and the carbon border adjustment mechanism webinar. So what businesses needs to know and do in line with those regulations. So thank you so much again for everyone to join us and sharing those insights with us. I hope you all have a good day. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.